Alexander was born in Pella. It was the capital of Macedonia. He was a child of destiny. His birth was said to be heralded by omens and portents. His father, Philip II, was a powerful king. He was determined to make Macedonia the dominant power in Greece. Alexander's mother, Olympias, was a woman of fierce ambition and strong will. She instilled in her son a sense of his own destiny. Alexander was a precocious child. He was tutored by the philosopher Aristotle. Aristotle taught him philosophy, literature, science, and the art of war. Alexander was a voracious reader. He was particularly fond of Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey. The tales of heroes and their exploits captivated his imagination. He dreamed of emulating their feats of valor on the battlefield. As a young man, Alexander proved himself to be a fearless warrior and a brilliant tactician. At the age of 16, he commanded a Macedonian force. He defeated a rebellious Thracian tribe. 2 years later, he played a key role in his father's victory at the Battle of Chaeronea. It was a decisive battle that established Macedonian dominance over Greece. Alexander was a born leader. He possessed a charisma that inspired his men. He was always at the forefront of battle. He led by example. He shared their hardships. He was known for his courage, his determination, and his unwavering belief in his own destiny. The year was 336 BC. Philip II of Macedon, conqueror of Greece, lay dead. He was struck down by an assassin's blade. The news of his demise sent shockwaves across the land. It reached the ears of his son Alexander. At the age of 20, Alexander was thrust onto the world stage. He was now the king of Macedon. He inherited his father's ambitions, his enemies, and his powerful army. The sudden death of Philip II created a power vacuum. Ambitious nobles within Macedon and the conquered Greek city-states saw an opportunity to break free from Macedonian rule. Revolts were brewing, alliances were shifting. Alexander faced a critical challenge. He needed to secure his throne and consolidate his power before he could even dream of fulfilling his father's dream of conquering Persia. Alexander moved swiftly and decisively. He had inherited his father's political acumen as well as his military genius. He rallied his loyal supporters. He crushed any hint of rebellion within Macedon itself. He moved with lightning speed to quell uprisings in the Greek city-states. His swift action demonstrated his strength and decisiveness. It sent a clear message to those who dared to challenge him. Alexander's response to the challenges he faced was not merely about brute force, it was also a calculated display of power, designed to intimidate his enemies and solidify his position. He understood that to rule effectively, he needed to inspire both fear and respect. He wasted no time in demonstrating his willingness to use whatever means necessary to achieve his goals. The young king was proving to be a force to be reckoned with. He was determined to forge his own destiny. With Greece firmly under his control, Alexander turned his attention eastward. The Persian Empire, vast and wealthy, beckoned. It was a prize worthy of Alexander's ambition. He saw an opportunity to fulfill his father's dream. He would conquer the Persians and create an empire that would span the known world. Alexander's decision to invade Persia was not simply an act of aggression. It was a calculated gamble. He knew that the Persian Empire was beset by internal divisions and weakened by years of decadent rule. He believed that he could exploit these weaknesses to his advantage. He was confident in his own abilities. He trusted in the strength of his army. Alexander's army was a force to be reckoned with. It was a highly disciplined and well-equipped fighting force. It was composed of Macedonians, Greeks, and other Balkan peoples. At the core of his army was the phalanx. It was a formidable formation of heavily armed infantrymen. It was supported by elite cavalry units, light infantry, and siege weapons. Alexander had inherited this military machine from his father. He honed it into an even more formidable weapon. The stage was set for a clash of titans. Alexander, the young king of Macedon, was about to lead his army against the might of the Persian Empire. The world held its breath. The fate of empires hung in the balance. A new chapter in history was about to be written. In the spring of 334 BC, Alexander crossed the Hellespont into Asia Minor. He was at the head of an army of 35,000 men. He left behind his regent Antipater to govern Macedon and Greece in his absence. Alexander's invasion marked the beginning of his epic Eastern campaign. It would last for over a decade. It would take him to the farthest reaches of the known world. Alexander's invasion of Persia was not just a military campaign, it was also a symbolic act. He presented himself as a liberator, freeing the Greek city-states of Asia Minor from Persian rule. He sought to avenge the Persian invasions of Greece a century and a half earlier. He aimed to spread Greek culture and civilization throughout the East. Alexander's ambition knew no bounds. He dreamed of creating a vast empire that would unite the East and West under his rule. He was driven by a thirst for glory. He was determined to leave his mark on history. He would become a legend. His name would be etched in the annals of time. The world watched in awe and trepidation as the young conqueror marched eastward, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. The Lion of Macedon had awakened, and he was hungry for conquest. The Granicus River, a relatively small but swift-flowing waterway in northwestern Asia Minor, became the setting for Alexander's first major confrontation with the Persian Empire. It was here, in the spring of 334 BC, that the young Macedonian king would prove his mettle against the assembled might of the Persian satraps and their Greek mercenary allies. The Persians, confident in their numbers and the strength of their cavalry, had chosen the battleground carefully, seeking to crush the Macedonian invasion before it could gain momentum. Upon reaching the Granicus River, Alexander faced a formidable obstacle. The Persian army, led by the satraps of Asia Minor, was arrayed on the opposite bank. The Persians had chosen their position well. The steep banks of the Granicus provided a natural defense, and the Persians were confident in their numerical superiority, particularly in cavalry. Alexander's generals urged caution, advising him to wait for a more favorable opportunity to attack. However, Alexander was not one for timidity. He saw through the Persian strategy. He recognized that a prolonged delay would only bolster Persian morale and give them time to gather reinforcements. He decided to strike quickly and decisively, catching the enemy off guard. His objective was not merely to defeat the Persians in battle, but to shatter their confidence and break their will to resist. Alexander's decision to attack across the Granicus was a bold gamble, one that could have easily ended in disaster. The Persians, commanded by experienced generals like Memnon of Rhodes, were no pushovers. They were confident in their ability to crush the Macedonian invaders. However, Alexander had an ace up his sleeve, his own strategic brilliance and the unwavering loyalty of his troops, who were eager to prove their worth in battle. The Battle of the Granicus was a clash of two different military doctrines. The Persians, relying on their superior numbers and the prowess of their cavalry, sought to overwhelm the Macedonians with a wave of mounted assaults. Alexander, on the other hand, aimed to use his cavalry as a strategic weapon, striking at the heart of the Persian command structure while his infantry held the line. As the Macedonian army prepared to cross the Granicus, Alexander unleashed his first surprise. He ordered his companion cavalry, the elite fighting force of his army, to charge across the river and engage the Persian horsemen. The companion cavalry, led by Alexander himself, smashed into the Persian lines with incredible force. The Persians, taken aback by the sudden ferocity of the Macedonian attack, were slow to react, and their ranks were quickly thrown into disarray. While the companion cavalry engaged the enemy horsemen, Alexander's infantry, under the command of Parmenio, began to ford the river. The Macedonian phalanx, a formidable wall of shields and pikes, advanced steadily towards the Persian lines, withstanding a hail of arrows and javelins. The Persians, witnessing the chaos among their cavalry and the relentless advance of the Macedonian infantry, began to waver. The Battle of the Granicus was a chaotic and bloody affair, with both sides fighting with desperate courage. Persian cavalrymen, clad in brightly colored robes and armed with bows and javelins, clashed with Macedonian horsemen, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. The air was thick with the sound of clashing steel, the cries of the wounded, and the thunder of hooves. The tide of battle turned decisively in Alexander's favor when he spotted a gap in the Persian lines near the enemy command post. Seizing the opportunity, he led a furious charge directly at the Persian commanders, including several satraps and their Greek mercenary captains. The Persian nobles, caught off guard by the sudden appearance of Alexander and his companions, fought bravely but were cut down. With their leaders slain or routed, the Persian resistance crumbled. Their cavalry, already badly shaken by the ferocity of the Macedonian charge, broke and fled, leaving their infantry to face the advancing Macedonian phalanx. The Persian foot soldiers, many of them conscripted levies with a little training or experience, were no match for the disciplined Macedonian infantry. They were cut down by the thousands. The rout was on. The Battle of the Granicus was a resounding victory for Alexander the Great, marking his first major triumph on Asian soil. The Persians suffered heavy casualties, losing thousands of men and several key commanders. Alexander's losses, on the other hand, were remarkably light, a testament to his tactical skill and the discipline of his troops. The victory at Granicus had far-reaching consequences. It sent shockwaves throughout the Persian Empire, shattering the aura of invincibility that had long surrounded the Persian army. It emboldened the Greek city-states of Asia Minor, many of which had chafed under Persian rule, and now saw an opportunity to regain their independence. For Alexander, the victory at Granicus was just the beginning. It was a stepping stone to greater glories, the first chapter in a campaign of conquest that would change the course of history. Following his victory at the Granicus River, Alexander pressed his advantage, pushing deeper into Persian territory. His string of victories continued, liberating Greek cities along the Ionian coast and securing vital supply lines. Darius III, the Persian king, could no longer afford to ignore this audacious Macedonian upstart. He assembled a massive army, drawing troops from every corner of his vast empire, determined to crush Alexander and drive him back into the sea. The two armies finally converged near the town of Issus in southern Anatolia in November of 333 BC. The location of the battle was significant. Issus lay on a narrow coastal plain, hemmed in by the Mediterranean Sea to the west and the Amanus Mountains to the east. The terrain favored Alexander, negating the Persian advantage in numbers and limiting their ability to maneuver their vast cavalry forces. Darius, confident in his overwhelming numerical superiority, was eager to engage Alexander in a decisive battle. He believed that he could simply overwhelm the Macedonians with sheer force of numbers. However, Alexander had other plans. He was a master of strategy, and he had carefully chosen the battleground, knowing that the narrow terrain would work to his advantage. Alexander's decision to engage Darius at Issus was a calculated risk. His army, though victorious in previous battles, was still outnumbered by the Persians. Defeat at Issus would be catastrophic, potentially ending his campaign and jeopardizing his hold on Greece. However, Alexander was a gambler at heart, and he was willing to stake everything on a single roll of the dice. As the sun rose on the morning of the battle, the two armies lined up facing each other across the Pinarus River. The Persians, arrayed in their traditional battle formation with their best infantry in the center and their cavalry on the wings, presented an imposing sight. Darius, clad in glittering armor and surrounded by his elite bodyguard, the Immortals took up his position in the center of his lines, confident of victory. Alexander, as was his custom, took his place at the head of his companion cavalry on the right wing of the Macedonian army. He ordered Parmenio, his trusted general, to command the left wing and hold the line against the Persian cavalry. The Macedonian phalanx, the iron core of Alexander's army, advanced steadily towards the Persian center, their shields interlocked, their pikes bristling. The battle began with a furious exchange of arrows and javelins, followed by a charge by the Persian cavalry on the Macedonian left. Parmenio's forces, outnumbered but well-disciplined, held their ground, repelling wave after wave of Persian attacks. Meanwhile, Alexander saw his opportunity. He launched a lightning-fast attack with his companion cavalry, aiming directly for the weakest point in the Persian line, the center, where Darius was positioned. The Persian infantry, mostly conscripts and levies with little training or experience, were no match for the ferocity of the Macedonian assault. The Macedonian phalanx, advancing relentlessly, drove a wedge into the Persian center, their pikes cutting down the enemy ranks. Alexander, at the head of his companion cavalry, smashed through the Persian lines, scattering the enemy before him. His target was Darius himself, and he charged towards the Persian king with reckless abandon, his troops struggling to keep pace with him. Darius, witnessing the collapse of his army around him and fearing for his own safety, panicked. He turned his chariot and fled the battlefield, leaving his troops to their fate. With their king in flight, the Persian army disintegrated. Thousands of Persian soldiers were cut down as they attempted to flee the battlefield. Many more drowned in the Pinarus River, their bodies clogging the waterway. The Macedonian victory was complete. The Battle of Issus was a stunning victory for Alexander the Great, cementing his reputation as a military genius and striking a decisive blow against the Persian Empire. The Persians suffered a catastrophic defeat, losing tens of thousands of men and a vast amount of treasure. Among the spoils of victory was the Persian royal family, Darius's mother, wife, and children, who had been abandoned by the fleeing king. Alexander, in a gesture that would become legendary, treated his captives with great respect and courtesy, ensuring their safety and well-being. After his resounding victory at Issus, Alexander the Great turned his attention southward, his eyes fixed on the wealthy and strategically vital cities of the Phoenician coast. These cities, renowned for their maritime prowess and commercial networks, held the key to controlling the eastern Mediterranean, a crucial objective in Alexander's grand strategy to isolate and defeat the Persian Empire. Among these coastal cities, none were more formidable or strategically important than Tyre, an island city known for its impregnable defenses and its proud, independent spirit. Tyre, situated on an island just off the coast of what is today Lebanon, was a hub of trade and commerce, its harbours bustling with ships from all corners of the Mediterranean world. Its merchants grew wealthy from their far-reaching trade networks, exchanging textiles, glassware, and precious metals throughout the region. The city's most prized export, however, was Tyrian purple, a rare and expensive dye extracted from sea snails, coveted by royalty and elites throughout the ancient world. The Tyrians, proud of their independence and their maritime heritage, had a long history of resistance to foreign invaders. Their city, protected by its island location and its formidable walls, had withstood numerous sieges, its defenders renowned for their tenacity and their innovative tactics. Alexander, however, was no ordinary conqueror. He was determined to add Tyre to his growing empire, recognizing its strategic value in his campaign against Persia. Undeterred by Tyre's fearsome reputation, Alexander approached the city in late 332 BC, expecting a swift surrender. He had sent envoys ahead, offering the Tyrians relatively lenient terms if they would open their gates to his army. The Tyrians, however, misjudged Alexander's resolve. They refused his offer, confident in their ability to withstand a siege, just as they had done countless times before. Their defiance would prove to be a costly miscalculation. Alexander, enraged by the Tyrians' refusal to submit, resolved to make an example of the island city. He ordered his engineers to begin constructing a causeway, a massive earthen ramp, to connect the mainland to the island, allowing his siege engines and troops to approach Tyre's walls. The Tyrians, however, were not content to sit idly by and watch as Alexander's forces advanced. The Tyrians, skilled seafarers and naval strategists, launched a series of daring raids against Alexander's construction efforts. Their warships, swift and maneuverable, harassed the Macedonian workers, pelting them with missiles and disrupting their progress. Tyrian divers sabotaged the causeway's foundations, while soldiers stationed on the city walls rained down arrows, javelins, and stones upon the exposed Macedonian troops. Despite the Tyrians' fierce resistance, Alexander's engineers persevered, their progress slow but steady. The causeway, as it inched closer to the island, became a testament to Alexander's unwavering determination and the engineering prowess of his army. To counter the Tyrians' naval superiority, Alexander ordered the construction of siege towers, towering wooden structures that could be rolled up to the city walls, providing his soldiers with a platform from which to engage the defenders in hand-to-hand combat. As the siege dragged on, both sides resorted to increasingly desperate measures. The Tyrians, running low on manpower, resorted to arming their slaves, promising them freedom if they fought bravely against the Macedonians. Alexander, frustrated by the slow progress of the siege, ordered his engineers to widen the causeway, allowing him to deploy more siege engines, including massive catapults that could hurl stones weighing hundreds of pounds. The Siege of Tyre, which had begun in the late summer of 332 BC, dragged on for 7 grueling months, testing the limits of both the besiegers and the besieged. The Tyrians, though outnumbered and outmatched, fought with the courage and tenacity for which they were renowned. Their ingenuity and determination, however, could not overcome Alexander's relentless pressure and his army's superior resources. In July of 332 BC, a breach was finally created in Tyre's formidable walls, the result of a sustained bombardment by Alexander's siege engines. Macedonian troops, eager for glory and plunder, surged through the breach, engaging in a brutal and bloody fight for control of the city. The Tyrians, though exhausted and outnumbered, fought with the fury of cornered animals, defending their homes and families, street by street, house by house. The fighting raged throughout the day, the streets of Tyre running red with the blood of the fallen. Alexander, always at the forefront of battle, personally led his troops in the assault, his courage and determination inspiring his men to even greater feats of valor. By nightfall, however, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Macedonian army had prevailed. Tyre, the once impregnable island fortress, had fallen. The fall of Tyre sent shockwaves throughout the ancient world. Cities that had once looked to Tyre for protection or had considered resisting Alexander's advance now hastened to offer their surrender, hoping to avoid a similar fate. For Alexander, the capture of Tyre was more than just a military victory. It was a testament to his unwavering will and his ability to overcome even the most daunting obstacles. It also gave him control of a strategic prize, a harbour capable of housing his growing fleet, a fleet that would prove crucial in his future campaigns. With Tyre firmly under his control and the Phoenician coast secure, Alexander turned his attention southward towards Egypt, the breadbasket of the Persian Empire and a land steeped in ancient history and mystique. Unlike his previous conquests, Alexander's entry into Egypt was met not with fierce resistance, but with open arms. The Egyptians, weary of centuries of Persian rule, saw Alexander as a liberator, a welcome alternative to their oppressive overlords. In November of 332 BC, Alexander and his army reached Memphis, the ancient capital of Egypt. There he was greeted by jubilant crowds, eager to welcome their new ruler. The Egyptian priests, recognizing Alexander's power and his respect for their ancient customs, proclaimed him pharaoh, the legitimate heir to the pharaohs of old. Alexander, ever the pragmatist, embraced this symbolic coronation, understanding the importance of Egyptian religion and tradition in legitimizing his rule. Alexander's conquest of Egypt was remarkably bloodless, a testament to his growing reputation as a fair and just ruler, as well as his shrewd political instincts. He understood that ruling through diplomacy and respect, rather than through brute force, would solidify his control over this ancient land. To further endear himself to his new subjects, Alexander paid homage to the Egyptian gods, offering sacrifices at their temples and participating in their rituals. During his time in Egypt, Alexander established the city of Alexandria at the mouth of the Nile River. This new city, strategically located at the crossroads of trade routes between East and West, would become a thriving center of commerce and culture, a lasting symbol of Alexander's vision for a world united under Hellenistic rule. Alexandria, with its magnificent library, its bustling harbor, and its diverse population, would become a beacon of learning and innovation, a testament to the enduring legacy of Alexander the Great. Darius III, the Persian emperor, was a hunted man. After his humiliating defeat at Issus, he had fled eastward, his dreams of crushing Alexander the Great shattered. But Darius was not yet finished. He still commanded vast resources, and the heart of his empire, with its ancient cities and boundless wealth, remained untouched by the Macedonian invasion. From his palace in Babylon, Darius rallied his forces, summoning troops from the furthest reaches of his empire. He conscripted soldiers from the steppes of Central Asia, the mountains of Armenia, and the deserts of Arabia. He recruited skilled horsemen from the Scythian tribes and war elephants from India. He even hired Greek mercenaries, veterans of the very armies that Alexander had defeated in Greece. Darius was determined to make his stand at Gaugamela, a village near the ancient Assyrian capital of Nineveh, in what is today northern Iraq. The year was 331 BC. The plains of Gaugamela, vast and open, would provide the ideal battleground for Darius's cavalry and war elephants, allowing him to utilize his numerical superiority to its fullest extent. He would crush Alexander, he vowed, and reclaim his lost honor. Alexander, meanwhile, had spent the months after Issus consolidating his hold on the eastern Mediterranean. He had besieged and captured the island city of Tyre, a feat of engineering and military prowess that had stunned the ancient world. He had marched into Egypt, where he had been welcomed as a liberator and crowned pharaoh. Now, with his rear secured and his army rested and resupplied, Alexander turned his attention eastward once more, his eyes fixed on the heart of the Persian Empire. He would confront Darius at Gaugamela, and the fate of the world would hang in the balance. The two armies, each a microcosm of the ancient world, met on the plains of Gaugamela on October 1st, 331 BC. The Persian army, a vast tapestry of cultures and languages, stretched as far as the eye could see. Darius had chosen his position carefully, deploying his troops on a specially prepared battlefield. He had ordered the ground leveled and cleared of obstacles to provide his cavalry and chariots with optimal maneuverability. At the forefront of the Persian line stood hundreds of scythe-wheeled chariots, their blades sharpened to a razor's edge, intended to carve through the ranks of the Macedonian infantry. Behind them massed the Persian infantry, a mix of professional soldiers and conscripted levies armed with spears, swords, and bows. On the wings, Darius deployed his cavalry, the pride of the Persian army, their numbers dwarfing those of Alexander's companion cavalry. Alexander, facing the largest army he had ever encountered, remained undaunted. He had faced long odds before and emerged victorious. He knew that victory would depend not on sheer numbers but on strategy, discipline, and the courage of his troops. He had carefully studied the Persian army, noting its strengths and weaknesses. He had devised a plan, a daring and unconventional plan, that would exploit the Persians' weaknesses and turn the tide of battle in his favor. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting long shadows across the battlefield, a hush fell over both armies. The air crackled with anticipation. The fate of empires, the destiny of civilizations hung in the balance. The clash of arms at Gaugamela would echo through history, its outcome shaping the course of the world for centuries to come. The battle began with a thunderous roar as the Persian scythe-wheeled chariots surged forward, their drivers urging their horses to full speed, aiming to break the Macedonian lines before they could even form their ranks. Alexander, anticipating this tactic, had ordered his infantry to advance in a staggered formation, creating gaps for the chariots to pass through harmlessly. The Macedonian infantry, disciplined and well-trained, stood their ground, their shields interlocked, their pikes bristling like a porcupine's quills. As the Persian chariots approached, the Macedonian infantry opened ranks, allowing the chariots to pass through, their deadly blades spinning harmlessly. Macedonian light infantry, armed with javelins and slings, then emerged from the gaps, unleashing a hail of missiles upon the chariot crews, disrupting their formations and sending many crashing into their own lines. While the Persian chariots were being neutralized, Alexander launched his own attack. He ordered his companion cavalry to charge the Persian left flank, aiming to draw the Persian cavalry away from their infantry and create a gap in their lines. The companion cavalry, led by Alexander himself, charged with their customary ferocity, their lances shattering shields, their swords cutting down enemy horsemen. The Persian cavalry, though outnumbering the Macedonians, were caught off guard by the suddenness and ferocity of the attack. They broke ranks, retreating before the onslaught of the companion cavalry, their formations disintegrating into a chaotic mass of horses and riders. Alexander, sensing victory, pursued the fleeing Persians relentlessly, his companion cavalry cutting them down by the hundreds. As Alexander pursued the Persian cavalry, a gap opened up in the Persian lines. Darius, witnessing the collapse of his left flank and the rout of his cavalry, panicked. He, like Issus, turned his chariot and fled, abandoning his troops to their fate. The sight of their king fleeing the battlefield demoralized the Persian army, their fighting spirit broken. Alexander, seeing the Persian king fleeing, wanted to pursue and capture Darius. However, Parmenio, Alexander's trusted general, urged him to focus on securing victory rather than risking his life in a futile chase after a single man, even if that man was the emperor of Persia. Reluctantly, Alexander heeded his general's advice. With their king gone and their lines broken, the Persian army disintegrated. Thousands of Persian soldiers were cut down as they attempted to flee the battlefield. Many more were captured, their fate uncertain. The Macedonian victory was complete. The Battle of Gaugamela was a decisive victory for Alexander the Great, marking the effective end of the Persian Empire. The Persians had suffered a catastrophic defeat, their army shattered, their king a fugitive. Alexander had achieved what many had thought impossible. He had conquered the largest empire the world had ever seen, but his victory came at a price. The Macedonian army had suffered heavy casualties, and Alexander himself had been wounded. The Battle of Gaugamela, though a triumph, was a Pyrrhic victory, a foreshadowing of the challenges and tragedies that lay ahead for Alexander the Great. With the Persian Empire in ruins, Alexander the Great stood at a crossroads. He had achieved what he had set out to do: conquer the Persians and avenge the humiliations they had inflicted upon Greece centuries earlier. Yet his ambition, insatiable as ever, drove him eastward, deeper into the heart of Asia, into lands unknown to most Greeks, where legends were born and dangers whispered on the wind. The year was 329 BC. Alexander, at the head of his weary but triumphant army, crossed the Hindu Kush mountains, the towering peaks, a formidable barrier between the known world and the mysteries that lay beyond. The Hindu Kush, with their treacherous passes, thin air and unpredictable weather, tested the limits of even the hardiest Macedonian soldiers, many of whom had been campaigning with Alexander for years, their bodies bearing the scars of countless battles. Alexander's journey eastward was not merely a military campaign, it was an odyssey into the unknown, a quest for knowledge and glory that mirrored the epic journeys of the heroes of Greek mythology. He encountered strange new cultures, peoples with customs and languages wholly unfamiliar to him and his men. He traversed vast steppes, where nomadic horsemen, skilled archers and fierce warriors posed a constant threat, their hit-and-run tactics a stark contrast to the set-piece battles Alexander had fought against the Persians. He ventured into ancient cities, remnants of long-forgotten empires, their names whispered in legends, their treasures rumored to be beyond measure. Section 2. The Dance of Blades and Shadows. Alexander's campaign in Central Asia was a grueling and often frustrating affair, a stark contrast to the relatively swift and decisive victories he had achieved against the Persians. The terrain, a vast expanse of deserts, mountains and steppes, favored his enemies, allowing them to dictate the terms of engagement and vanish into the landscape as quickly as they appeared. The Scythians, nomadic warriors renowned for their horsemanship and archery skills, proved to be particularly elusive and deadly adversaries. They would appear on the horizon, a cloud of dust heralding their approach, their arrows raining down upon the Macedonian ranks, only to melt away before Alexander's cavalry could engage them in close combat. Alexander, a master of adapting to his surroundings and his enemy's tactics, quickly realized that traditional Greek warfare, with its emphasis on pitched battles and disciplined formations, was ill-suited to this new kind of conflict. He embraced mobility, breaking his army into smaller, more agile units, adopting the tactics of his enemies, using speed and surprise to counter their hit-and-run tactics. He recruited local guides and auxiliary troops, their knowledge of the terrain and their expertise in unconventional warfare proving invaluable in this unforgiving landscape. He encouraged his men to adopt local customs and learn the languages of the people they encountered, fostering a sense of unity and respect between the conquerors and the conquered. Section 3. The Bactrian Queen. In the spring of 327 BC, amidst the turmoil of his campaigns in Central Asia, Alexander's life took an unexpected turn. He met Roxana, a Bactrian princess, the daughter of a local chieftain who had been captured by Alexander's forces. Roxana, by all accounts, was a woman of extraordinary beauty, intelligence, and spirit. Her dark eyes, it was said, could captivate the heart of any man. Alexander, smitten by Roxana's beauty and captivated by her spirit, decided to take her as his wife. It was a controversial decision. His generals, accustomed to the pragmatic marriages of convenience common among Macedonian royalty, were aghast. They saw this union as a threat to the stability of Alexander's empire, a distraction from his military objectives. Alexander, however, was unmoved by their concerns. He saw his marriage to Roxana not as a political liability, but as a strategic asset, a symbol of his commitment to forging a new kind of empire, one built on cultural exchange and mutual respect. He understood that to rule effectively in these distant lands, he needed to win the hearts and minds of the people, and what better way to do so than by embracing their customs and traditions. The marriage of Alexander and Roxana, a union between the conqueror and the conquered, between East and West, was a grand spectacle, a fusion of Macedonian and Bactrian traditions. Alexander, clad in a golden robe, his brow adorned with a laurel wreath, stood beside Roxana, resplendent in silks and jewels, her dark hair cascading down her back. It was a union that transcended politics, a testament to the power of love and the allure of the unknown. Section 4. The Taming of the Central Asia were not without their challenges and setbacks. He faced rebellions, conspiracies, and the ever-present threat of mutiny from his own weary troops, who longed to return home after years of constant warfare. Yet he persevered, his ambition fueled by an unquenchable thirst for glory and a vision of a world subdued rebellious provinces, crushing uprisings with ruthless efficiency, but also showing mercy and leniency to those who submitted to his rule. He founded cities, strategic outposts of Greek culture, enduring monuments to his legacy. He forged alliance territories through diplomacy as much as through military might. By 326 BC, Alexander had subdued Bactria and Sogdiana, the easternmost provinces of the former Persian Empire. His armies reaching the banks of the Jaxartes River, the very edge of the known world. He had faced down Scythian horsemen, scaled treacherous mountain passes, and crossed scorching deserts. He had tamed the east, bringing order to chaos, his name whispered in awe and fear from the shores of the Mediterranean. The year was 326 BC. Alexander the Great, the conqueror of Persia, stood on the banks of the Hyphasis River, the modern-day Beas River, in what is now Punjab, India. He gazed across the swirling waters, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where the sun beat down on the lush, untamed lands that lay beyond. He had come further east than any Macedonian king before him, his armies marching from the shores of the Mediterranean to the edge of the known world. Behind him stretched his empire, a vast tapestry of conquered lands and subjugated peoples, stretching from Greece in the west to the Indus River Valley in the east. He had vanquished the Persian Empire, toppled Darius III, and crushed countless rebellions. He had crossed deserts and mountains, faced down war elephants and Scythian horsemen, his thirst for conquest seemingly unquenchable. Yet here, on the banks of the Hyphasis, Alexander's seemingly unstoppable advance would come to a halt. The air, thick with humidity and buzzing with insects, carried a strange tension, a sense of foreboding that even Alexander, with his legendary confidence and unwavering belief in his own destiny, could not ignore. His men, veterans of countless battles, their bodies weary from years of constant campaigning, their spirits yearning for home, had reached their breaking point. The rumors had been swirling through the camp for weeks, whispered among the rank and file, spreading like wildfire through the tents and campfires. They spoke of lands beyond the Hyphasis, a land of scorching deserts and impenetrable jungles, where ferocious tribes and monstrous creatures awaited. They spoke of the Ganges River, a river so vast it made the Indus seem like a mere stream, beyond which lay even more powerful kingdoms and unconquerable foes. For the first time in his illustrious career, Alexander the Great faced a mutiny, not from his enemies on the battlefield, but from his own men, the very soldiers who had followed him across continents, their loyalty and courage unquestioned, their sacrifices immeasurable. They had had enough. They yearned for home, for their families, for the rolling hills of Macedon, for the familiar sights and sounds of their homeland. The mutiny, if it could even be called that, was not a violent uprising, but a collective refusal to go any further. The Macedonian soldiers, gathered in their thousands, their faces etched with exhaustion and apprehension, stood silent as Alexander addressed them, his voice echoing across the assembled ranks. He spoke of glory, of riches, of the immortality that awaited them if they would but follow him across the river into the heart of India. He appealed to their sense of duty, their loyalty to their king, their pride in being Macedonians, conquerors of the world. But his words, usually so persuasive, so inspiring, fell on deaf ears. The soldiers, their resolve hardened by years of hardship and the whispers of terrors that lay ahead, stood firm. They would go no further. Alexander, accustomed to unquestioning obedience, was furious. He stormed off to his tent, his anger echoing through the camp. For 3 days and nights he refused to eat or speak to anyone, his legendary temper simmering. He could not believe that his men, his companions, would dare defy him, would dare challenge his will, his destiny. In the end, Alexander, a pragmatist as much as a dreamer, recognized the futility of his position. He could not force his men to march any further. Their spirit was broken, their bodies spent. He would have to turn back, his dream of conquering the entire known world unfulfilled. It was a bitter pill to swallow, a defeat more crushing than any he had ever suffered on the battlefield. In the summer of 326 BC, Alexander ordered his army to turn south, following the course of the Indus River towards the Arabian Sea. He would not return the way he had come, through the treacherous mountain passes of the Hindu Kush. Instead, he would lead his army through the Gedrosian Desert, a vast and unforgiving expanse of sand and rock that stretched along the coast of what is now southern Pakistan and Iran. The march through the Gedrosian Desert would prove to be one of the most harrowing and costly chapters in Alexander's extraordinary career, a testament to the folly of pride and the unforgiving nature of the natural world. The desert, a sea of sand under a merciless sun, stretched before them, a shimmering mirage that promised only hardship and suffering. The heat, relentless and oppressive, beat down on the marching men, their armor heavy on their sweat-soaked bodies. The sand, fine and powdery, swirled around their feet, blinding them, choking them, turning their once proud uniforms into a gritty, dust-caked mess. Supplies, already stretched thin, dwindled with each passing day, water becoming more precious than gold, food a distant memory. Alexander the Great, the boy king who had conquered the world, was dead. He was only 32 years old. He died in Babylon, in the palace of the Persian kings he had vanquished. The exact cause of his death remains a mystery. Some whispered of poison, others of a fever that ravaged his body. The truth, like so much else about Alexander, is lost to history. His empire, vast and sprawling, stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus River. It encompassed a bewildering array of cultures, languages and peoples. His dream of a united world, a fusion of East and West under his enlightened rule, died with him. His generals, the Diadochi, ambitious and ruthless, would carve up his empire amongst themselves. Decades of war and bloodshed would follow, yet even in death, Alexander's impact on the world was undeniable. He had redrawn the map of the ancient world. He had opened up new trade routes, connecting east and west in ways never before imagined. He had spread Greek culture and language throughout his vast domain. His conquests gave rise to the Hellenistic Age, a vibrant period of cultural exchange and intellectual ferment that would last for centuries. Alexander's legend would continue to grow long after his death. He would be romanticized, mythologized, and idolized by generations to come. He would be hailed as a military genius, a visionary leader, a tragic hero. His story, a tale of ambition, conquest, and untimely death, would continue to fascinate and inspire. He was Alexander the Great, and his legacy, forged in blood and gold, would endure for millennia.